welcome to the Evening at Egan series. Before we get going here, I just want to make an announcement. If there's anyone sitting in the back that's standing that would like to spread out a little bit, you can head over to the Morant cafeteria just across the way. We've got a live video feed from here set up over there, so you can sit over there at your leisure and watch the talk that Greg is going to give. I guess at the end here of Greg's presentation, if you could do us a favor and for those of you that have questions, if you can just hang on a second and I'll run the mic over to you so that everyone can hear your question. Otherwise, it's hard to get these questions recorded and fed out onto the television. You're live right now, so. So tonight's talk is going to be given by Greg Brown. The title is An Energy Plan for Alaska Without the Use of Oil, the Technology, the Possibilities, and the Plan. The presentation will be a fun and informative way to look at energy and possibilities now and in the future for Alaska. A little bit about Greg. Greg graduated in '73 from Virginia Polytechnic University, and he worked at Siemens Corporation, where he worked for the largest he ran the largest division of Siemens Energy and Automation in the U.S. He went on to become the president and CEO of Schneider Canada and president and CDO of Schneider Mexico, as well as Schneider Mid-Americas and Latin America. He's also been the president of Xantrex, for those of you that have inverters and are into renewable energy, a Canadian inverter company. And he's also been president and CEO of Heads and Threads International, a division of the Fortune 500 company Allegheny. And it's really interesting how a guy like that becomes interested in sustainability and energy, isn't it? So after all that, after traveling throughout the world, he decided that he was going to retire in Juneau 3 years ago. He liked it so much. And so he actually is now retired and lives in Juneau pretty much full time, and where he's always wanted to live. And he's attended a number of classes at UAS, and he's a licensed boat captain, and an able-bodied seaman, and a commercial pilot. He just got back from the Solar Conference in San Diego, and he's about to head out the door to help the government of Ontario with some renewable energy issues. And without further ado, I'm going to give Greg the mic.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't think I need this, do I? Thank you very much for coming. I was worried about tonight because I know it was the opening of the James Bond movie. And I figured, well, you could either spend $10 or with popcorn $15, or you could come see me for free. And I thought, well, I had a pretty good chance. I took several courses here. One of them I took was Perspective of the Natural World. And for any students happen to be here writing a paper, I consider myself an environmental capitalist, which is kind of an oxymoron, but I build things. I've done that most of my life. Plants all over the world, in China, Latin America, Europe. But I always try to do it with the most friendly environmental look at how to build it. And the least impact on the environment is what I strive to do. Well, it's Friday, week's over, so I thought I'd really give you some discouraging news here. This is the rate in which we're using imported fossil fuel, real time. And during the period of the time of this presentation, we will spend about $100 million, so listen carefully. Every second's a lot of money. Thought we'd get through this question right off the bat, because it's always one that comes up. Who's causing the global warming problem? And this is the graph that NOAA puts out right off their website. And I think it's pretty obvious that mankind had something to do with it. And I think we can argue a lot about whose fault it is. But we do have a definite problem there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Most of the problems started about the turn of the industrial age right in here. And it's been going up ever since. And maybe other things are happening. You know, maybe the poles are switching magnetic force, which they do every couple million years. But we are contributing to it. So the way I look at it, it doesn't matter what the cause is. Global warming is occurring, and we have a choice. We can slow it down. We can even possibly reverse it. But we've got to end our dependence on fossil fuel and carbon emissions, or at least reduce them substantially. This is how the world looks at the fossil fuel right now. And you can see from that chart over in the end there that about 80% of the energy in the entire world is created with fossil fuel. That energy is going, the amount of energy required is going up dramatically. Look at what's happening in China, what's happening in Cambodia, Vietnam. These places are all industrializing. And as that occurs, there's going to be more and more demand for those resources. And at the same time, you can see what's happening with CO2 emissions. And I don't think I have to say anything about the price of oil. It's been going up and down now a lot. It's down right now, but I would bet you a pretty good sum of money that it'll go up in a few years. Alaska, there's been a lot of discussion about this. And Alaska probably has more impacted by global warming than any other place in the United States. Every one of these orange dots represent an area which has been defined as being affected by global warming. Some of the areas over in here are places where it used to rain. There used to be a lot of water, and there isn't so much water. Up here we have the warming and the ice pack. We have erosion in many areas here. The sea level is coming up. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And so we have an opportunity to try to reverse this the best we can. The problem, the way T. Boone Pickens calls it, and I happen to agree with him, is right now we're using about 25% of the world's oil. Actually, when back in 1970, when I was in college, we were using 24% of the world's the oil was being imported. And it's steadily increased, and now 70% of the oil is imported. That amounts to $700 billion annually. That's the biggest transfer of wealth we've ever seen in the world, the history of the world. That money is going out. About 500 billion of it's going to the Mideast. About 200 billion of it's going to other countries, Mexico and other places. But it's a huge transfer of wealth. And it just so happens that ends up being about one standard bailout plan. But I didn't fix the number. That just happened to be that way. And how do we see it? This is how we see it. The question, every time I look at this slide, and every time I look at this, I was in Atlanta about 3 weeks ago, paid $2.04 a gallon. They produce zero amount of oil in Georgia. And yeah, look what the price we're paying up here. So anyway, this is one of the issues we have, and looking at ways to come up with inexpensive energy. The other concern I have is I'm really not sure our leaders of our country really understand the fundamentals of alternative energy. And I have a quote up here that always makes me wonder when I look at it. Yeah. If I ever get a chance to meet this gentleman, I'd like to know where the rest of the solar energy comes from. And if you're not in the U.S., I have no idea. So we're going to spend a little time talking about the technology. And then we'll talk a little bit about Alaska in general, Southeast Alaska, some opportunities I think we have. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a national plan. I hadn't originally planned to talk about that, but with all the issues that have happened since August when I agreed to have this presentation, I think it's pretty timely we look at a national plan. I have some ideas how to pull that off today. The technologies, this isn't by far not all the technologies. These are technologies that I think are far enough along that they can be applied pretty economically and work pretty well. But there are a lot of other technologies that are still out there 4 or 5 years, but they're just not ready to be put in place yet. Gasification. This is one of the really cool ones. It gives us some good opportunity to do a lot of things. If you look at the, you can make almost anything out of it if you start out with a carbon-based product. One of the things we're going to be talking about later, if we put in coal as a feedstock and go through our gasifier, get rid of our sulfur, we can come out with synthetic gasoline, something we can use pretty easily. We can also come out with a lot of different products. You can come out with methane, you can come out with hydrogen, and hydrogen is where I think we need to go, but we're a long way from there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later also. The technology is coming along real well. They're looking at putting a facility off the Cook Inlet. There's an article in the paper today about putting one up at Mount Healy, up a little bit south of Fairbanks. This technology is available. And to give you an idea of the scale of it, You look at other places in the world, and they're doing it today. Don't have to use coal. You can use switchgrass. You could use a lot of different types of material, but you end up with some kind of fluid, if you want it in a fluid form or a gas form, that can be used to create energy. There also is a little bit less sophisticated way to do it too. I mean, these machines here are very impressive and very complicated, but here we go. This looks pretty interesting, and I actually talked to a gentleman in Germany when I read about this. And if you look at the writing down at the bottom, they have 2,500 farms today in Germany that are powered by the waste from these cows. The cow puts out about 162 pounds of waste a day. And I know, that's a lot. And somebody goes out and gathers it, puts it in a slurry. That's a job I wouldn't want to have, but puts it in a slurry and ends up creating power, and they self-power these farms through this technology. The byproducts, by the way, are phosphorus that they use for fertilizer, and I guess you get some milk also. So, biomass. Actually, my friend Russell here got me working on a biomass issue, looking at the Prince of Wales Island and the biomass that's sitting down there. Biomass has a lot of potential in Southeast Alaska in particular. I have some samples up here we can talk about when the presentation's over, and things we've made biomass products out of. Pellets. My house in T Harbor was originally oil, and I now heat it with wood pellets. I have bought a wood pellet stove from Hearth Products. We made bio bricks, which we have over here. We can make them out of all kinds of things. The one in the plastic bag is made out of sewage. A lot of people say, well, that's pretty innovative. It's been around for 10 million years. The Africans have been cooking over elephant sewage for a long, long time. So these technologies aren't new. They really aren't. It's just a matter of how we apply them. When I was at an apartment in Munich, Germany for a while, the way we heated that apartment was biomass, and that was 1982. So these are tried and true technologies. The alcohol from grapes down here, I actually have a friend that set up a biomass business, and what he did is he made a deal with Napa Valley and got all the old grapes after they made wine from them and turned them into pellets. And he also did the same thing with Starbucks with all their old coffee east of the Mississippi, and he uses those now for smoking meat, and he sells them as a product to smoke meat from, which has nothing to do with this presentation. It's just kind of interesting. Ethanol, topic we all hear a lot about. Just the physics of ethanol, say we're going to get about a third less energy out of a gallon. There was a lot of discussion about corn ethanol for a while, and that's what this slide over here is about. It's also going to be made of cellulose, which is plant growth that people don't eat, so it really doesn't affect the food source at all. But it takes quite a bit of, but it's pretty good stuff. It burns pretty well. It takes quite a bit of coal to make it if you're using electrical. You combine it with fuel, other gasoline, in order to make it run in modern cars. So it uses a fair amount of fossil fuel, amount of coal, and a lot of water. In the olden days, corn ethanol, which is just 200 proof corn whiskey, and from my experience, that's pretty good stuff from time to time too. But my grandfather used to tell stories. He lived in Illinois, and when they were going across country trips back in 1910 and 1915, they'd pull into farmhouses when they couldn't find gas stations in the Model Ts, and they'd actually fill up their car with ethanol, 200 proof corn whiskey. And then they'd take a little bottle for themselves, and off down the road they'd go. Which brings me to one of my favorite topics and stories, Prohibition. My great Aunt Katie was the head of the WCTU, Women Christian Temperance Union in Chicago. And she always took great pride in the fact that she brought Prohibition in and was one of the leaders of that movement. My father, who liked to take a drink once in a while, really hated my great Aunt Katie. Led for some really interesting Christmas dinners. But the truth of the matter is there had been a lot of efforts to have prohibition. I mean, women have tried to keep guys from drinking for years, and for thousands of years, probably. Hasn't worked. Why did it work this time? Rockefeller. Standard Oil, they looked at these farmhouses as being competition. So they put together what is really a brilliant strategy. They got the feds to go out with machine guns and shotguns and put their competition out of business. And in the 12 years Prohibition was enacted, and you always hear about Al Capone. He made a lot of money. Rockefeller made 100 times what Al Capone ever made. But he was always pleased to give all the credit to the WCTU, and he just went to the bank. So there's the truth behind Prohibition. Ocean, we have a lot of wave energy. We have a lot of tidal energy, tremendous amount of tidal energy. This is a product that swellfuel.com, you can look at it. These products are being used over in Europe. I wouldn't say a lot, but some. They've had pretty good success with them. There are a couple different models, actually. There's a long snake type. And what they do is they put an anchor, which is, I can find my arrow, there it is, right here. And as the waves go up and down, it moves this red lever up and down, and that creates power. Pretty neat stuff. Tidal energy. This upper right-hand picture is actually a picture of Cook Inlet, where we're capturing tidal energy in Alaska today. One mistake a lot of people make is they think you have to have a complete dam, and you really don't. You just have to have a good flow of water. The picture over here in the bottom, that's a tidal generator in France. It puts out 100 megawatts. It's pretty good size. And this technology up here with the rotating fans, just like a windmill underwater, that's also in place in many places. And it's really simple. You know, the sea comes in, it goes through these turbines, and it turns the turbines, creates power, and when the tide goes out, it goes just the other way. So it's a pretty inexpensive way and pretty effective way of creating power. And we certainly have enough tidal power up here. In fact, a place like Angoon, I don't know if any of you have ever had to shoot that 10-foot standing wave they have over there. They have enough power over there to sink a battleship when the current's running. Solar. This happens to be a project that I'm involved with right now in Ontario, working on solar energy. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There are really three types. There's photovoltaic, there's solar concentrating technology, and then there's solar concentrating photovoltaic technology. This particular picture is right outside of Las Vegas. A lot of Las Vegas is powered this way. This is called concentrating technology. And what this is a pipe that actually goes right down here. And these are mirrors that focus on the pipe and heat up the fluid in the pipe. And from this hot fluid, virtually end up with steam, you generate power. And because it's steam, they can collect enough steam so they can actually operate the generators overnight. So it's not something that just operates during the day. This plant is on the drawing boards right now. It's going to be built in Arizona. It will be the biggest concentrating photovoltaic plant in the world. And hopefully they're just getting ready to break ground on that in May of next year. Same thing, but just different design. These are mirrors that are around the side, and they focus on the top of this tower. This is in Spain, by the way, right outside of Valencia. And so these mirrors focus on the top. They create a very high temperature up there. It turns water to steam. They collect the steam, and the steam actually runs the generators. Really cool stuff because you can collect the power and use it overnight. You don't have to worry about the sun going down and your power system going away. The most popular photovoltaic is over here on the left, these little lights that you see by the lawns. Actually, that's the biggest single market. They now have it, it's flexible, and you can make your roofs out of it. This particular picture isn't very good, but it's actually a Walmart project that I was involved with down in California, where we were putting panels on top of Walmart, and Walmart was selling the power from those panels on 30-year contracts to people like General Electric and also Aerojet, General Motors. I hope they didn't make too many contracts with General Motors, but and Citigroup was doing the financing of the whole program. So you could actually buy the top of a Walmart, and what you were buying is 30 years of output of the power. This is a fairly new product down here at the bottom, the photovoltaic paint, where you actually put part one on, let it dry, put part two on. They have a little connection to it, and you can have the side of your house photovoltaic and generating power. Cool stuff. This is amazing to me, and I've never seen one of these. Next time I go over to Spain, I'm going to make a special trip. But the technology was so interesting, and it's never been used for geothermal, but there's absolutely no reason you can't. This is a tower, and what this is right here, it's like a mylar. It's a plastic. And these towers are giant. And the plastic comes out like this, and the sun beats on the plastic, heats up the air underneath. And at the same time it heats up the air, it heats up the ground. So you have this kind of effect. The sun's coming through, heating up the air, heating up the ground. And because it's a chimney, it goes through these turbines and creates power. Now what happens at night? The ground is warm because it's been heated all day, so it's now creating warmer air. And it creates power all night. And the thing about it that they didn't realize was going to happen is underneath here, they thought they'd end up with a dead zone underneath the mylar, but it rains every night there. They controlled them out because of condensation, and so now they're growing fruits and vegetables at the same time. These things are mammoths in size. Here's a picture of one. And this is right outside, also not far from Valencia. That puts it in perspective. Look at the size of that sucker. It's huge. I know. But the interesting thing about it, if you have geothermal, if you have a place where the ground is warmer than the air around it, you could put one of these things over that, and you could generate geothermal energy, turn it into electricity with something relatively simple. You'd obviously think I needed to upgrade this presentation. I don't know. I thought it was going pretty well, but anyway. Nuclear, isn't it amazing what you can do with those little letters? I tell you. Yeah, I have a degree in nuclear engineering as well as mechanical engineering. So I know a little bit about this topic. There are several options available for nuclear. You can look at small nuclear facilities. If you look at bigger ones, it's going to take 15 years. It actually takes about 5 years to build it and 10 years of paperwork. But there are a lot of issues associated with nuclear energy. Environmental issues. There's certainly security issues. You know, they talk about these things being in Iran, and you know, if somebody takes over control room in there, and I used to be an operator in a control room. I mean, you can do some serious damage. You can create a Chernobyl. You could create a 3-mile island if you know what you were doing. The other thing that happens is you end up with a lot of waste, and this is hot waste. And I mean, it stays hot for 1,000 years. So now you have to have security of that. Because if that should fall in the wrong hands, it can be spread out all over the place. And you don't get the big boom like you do with a mushroom-shaped cloud, but you accomplish the same thing. You probably, since we were talking about James Bond earlier, the old KGB stories where they put nuclear waste under somebody's chair and he'd sit on it every day for work, that works. I mean, that does. It'll take 2 months to kill you, but it will. And so there are a lot of issues with security about this and where you store that waste. And there are lawsuits all over the place in the United States right now because there isn't a single state that really wants to have this in their state. So there are a lot of political issues there, and it's a pretty dangerous technology, even though I've been involved with it. You know, we heard of 3-Mile Island. I had to testify in front of Congress about a problem up in upstate New York. They had a nuclear facility that was back in the 80s. So there's just a lot of things that can happen. I'm not totally against it. I'm really not. But I think there's some other better alternatives right now. Wind is one of them. We have a couple different types here. These are kites. And actually, what happens is the kite pulls the string, and then when it gets to the end of the string, it folds up, and the other kite goes up, so it goes like this as you're sailing across the ocean, and it creates some power. This particular windmill over here, I don't think there's much future in that, but it's kind of cool. This other windmill, right there, that's actually in the western United States, but I was involved with a project where we put these things 11 miles off the coast of Spain. One windmill was 3.5 megawatts. One windmill powered 160,000 homes. You couldn't see them. You didn't have bird migration problems because they were so far off the coast. We mounted these things on oil platforms. Each blade was 105 meters long. I mean, these things are gigantic. They dwarf the Empire State Building, but they put out a lot of power. And so there are a lot of opportunities to use windmills. I put this slide in here because when I was down in San Diego, I was meeting with some people I do work with. Silicon is a wind and solar company out of Spain, and we were doing some design work. And I was telling them about Juneau, and they're going to be coming up here to Juneau next summer, which I'm pretty excited about. But we started talking about mine shafts and the Perseverance Trail. When you walk up there, you know, that little mine shaft there, and the air coming out of it. And you know, one of the problems with putting wind power here is you'd have to put it on top of the mountains. It's hard to get lines up there. It's hard to do maintenance up there. It's just almost prohibitive. So I said, well, geez, what if we put these in one of the mine shafts? You know, if we had enough wind going through there, could we create some power? And we were enjoying a little corn ethanol during this discussion. But so they actually set this little experiment up over in their laboratory, and we're doing some experimentation with how much velocity we'd actually have if simulated mine shaft. If the University of Alaska here is interested with their engineering department and doing some work and helping get us some data on this, we'd be happy to donate this product to the university and see if we can end up with something unique here in Juneau. They told me I couldn't make that offer unless I put the logo up, so that's why the logo's up. Geothermal. Lots of opportunities around here. We've got Warm Springs not far away from here. Really simple technology. You have an injection well, which is where your wastewater goes down after it's been condensed. You have your hot water coming out of your geothermal reservoir, going to your power plant and generating power. Lots of opportunities in Alaska for this. This is really cool stuff, and this is the basics, or one of the basics we're going to talk about a little bit about later with Iceland and how they did it. Our airport is about to use a ground source heat pump technology, and there are a couple other places in town. Actually, my home in Atlanta, which I don't go to very much anymore, but I have a heat pump that uses air there. Ground source heat pumps are really cool because, especially if you can get where the ground isn't frozen, the temperature about 40, 45 degrees, there's always heat there, believe it or not. And you can actually extract that heat right out of the ground. And I won't take you through the math on it, but you actually gain more power from the heat pump than you actually put into it electrically. So it's really a good technology. I think it'd be relatively expensive to install around here for residential application, but certainly for commercial applications, there's a lot of opportunities for this. And I heard a rumor that, and I'm not sure about it, that the new swimming pool in Juneau is going to be heated this way. Natural gas. We talk a lot about natural gas. This car on the left is the new Honda natural gas car. I rented it. One just like it when I was in Los Angeles. And it's works right off of natural gas. This is their home fill-up station. There we go. Right here. So if you happen to have gas coming to your house, like a lot of places in the Midwest do, you can put that right in your house and fill up your car overnight. It took 11 minutes for me to fill up the car when I went to a filling station that did this in California. And it was dirt cheap. I paid about $1, this thing 63 cents a gallon, but I paid about $1.10 a gallon for it. There are lots of ways natural gas is sold, and for car applications, they use gas equivalent gallons. I got about 33 miles per gallon with it, so I was pretty happy with that. It can also be used for heat generation and other types of fuel. There's 727 gas stations across the United States today. I won't take you through that since we're having no problem with the hyperlink. Utah is having a run on this, actually. The first natural gas car that I ever saw was a truck, and it was in Texas. And a lot of the farmers down there back in the 60s actually converted their trucks to natural gas because it was considered a waste gas off the oil wells. And so you could buy it like for 15 cents a gallon. So they make these conversions. So there's a lot of experience with natural gas in vehicles. In fact, there are over 8 million vehicles today in the world that run on natural gas. Salt Lake City, you can see here they're paying 87 cents a gallon, and this was in August of this year, not too long ago. Coal. About 50% of our electrical energy today in the United States is generated with coal. One of the interesting things about coal and oil is when you start to run into shortages, the price of these commodities go up. You know, the old law of supply and demand. The interesting thing about photovoltaic and wind is when the demand for those go up, you get an operating efficiency in production and the price goes down. Just like this computer. The first computer I bought was in 1979, had 56K of memory, and I paid $3,500 for it. Prices of computers have gone down dramatically, and that's the same with the silicon and those things that are used for photovoltaic and for all their types of alternative energy. This is one of my favorite. In many areas of the country, California, hydro is not considered a green energy because obviously you change your streams and those kind of things. Being an environmental capitalist, as I am, I think this is a good alternative to coal and other things, and because it has a lot less impact on the environment than those types of technology. Well, we're really lucky to have AEL&P here and being able to utilize hydro the way we do. Pretty simple to do. We should keep looking for more opportunities to do it, and it's really very cost effective. Once you get your initial cost in, the good Lord moves the water up there every year, and we just take advantage of the power. Iceland's probably the model, the best model for using alternative energy. 99% of their energy today is generated from renewable sources, 81% from hydroelectric, and the remainder from geothermal. They're heating most of their building, virtually all the buildings, with either the waste heat from their facilities or else electricity. They started this strategy about 45 years ago, and they had a very poor country, isolated from almost everywhere. I mean, they aren't close to anything. And, you know, they had a fishing industry. They were paying a fortune for oil, and they had to come up with an idea, a strategy, so they did. And that was to utilize alternative energy, and they did it very, very successfully. And they've ended up with a very long-term strategy. They've been able to attract some large corporations. The company that they went after made aluminum, uses tremendous amount of water and tremendous amount of power. And they actually ship bauxite clear from Australia and process it in Iceland. Think about that distance. Because the power is so cheap in Iceland. Here's a picture of one of their geothermal plants. They're having a lot of financial difficulties right now in the country because they invested in our subprime interest investment opportunities. But their plan is to go to hydrogen. They're still using fossil fuels for transportation for their buses and cars. And so they put a plan a couple of years ago to go to hydrogen. Because now they have electricity, they have water. If you have water and electricity, you can make hydrogen. It's got to be cheap electricity. So here's where they're at. They want to be the world's first hydrogen society. They didn't realize they had any oil even around them until recently. And now they're actually putting a plan together to sell the rights to those oil wells that exist off their coast because they won't need them. They'll want to operate off of hydrogen. And they've made their buses using fuel cells, and I have a little fuel cell up here we can look at later. They've actually made some prototype boats that can be used for transporting things using hydrogen. What's the byproduct? Water. Pretty cool stuff. Give you an idea what hydrogen costs today. You're paying about $1.40 a pound delivered. It costs 32 cents a pound to make, so it's pretty inexpensive to make. It's used a lot in refineries and those kind of things. So equivalent, you're looking at $2.80 a gallon for hydrogen. And I had an opportunity to drive a hydrogen car not terribly long ago, made by BMW, and it was pretty cool. As we're driving down the road, people kept pointing at us, and we kept going, you know, kind of a cool-looking car, you know, but why are they pointing at us? And finally, this lady rolls down her window, and she says, "You have gasoline leaking out the back of your car." And it was just the water that we were pouring out of the back of the car, because during the combustion process, we created pure water. I mean, you could drink the water, but it was coming out of the exhaust of the car. Spain, I'm probably going to be doing some work with a Spanish company starting next month up in Ontario, Canada. If you have You might, I don't know how many of you have seen this little atlas, but in the back of this, and I have no idea why they have it there, they talk about the plan for Ontario to use a feed-in tariff and get alternative energy. And that's their plan for making the conversion from their coal-fired facilities they use today to using feed-in tariffs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a while, but I'll be going up there probably to do a 30-megawatt project. 3 10-megawatt projects is what it will be. I'm flying up December 15th, I believe. Time to talk about Alaska. I looked at Alaska, I think, a little differently than at least the articles I've been reading in the paper about energy. Obviously, we want lower cost fuel. I threw in there economic growth. If I have low cost energy and I have water, I can attract companies and I can attract business every time. And especially where we're at. We're not that far away from places. People tend to make it sound like we're a billion miles away. I used to bring in 40 containers from China every week, clear across the ocean. We're a lot closer than that. There are a lot of opportunities here to do that. We want to do it in a friendly, environmentally friendly manner and optimize the value of the resources. Today we have a little bit of power generated from alternative energy, but most of it's natural gas, hydroelectric. And this is all across Alaska, not just the southeast. We'll talk about the southeast in a few minutes. But not very much from alternative, a little bit. There may be more behind this logic than I see, but I don't think I'd be so quick to try to sell our natural gas. It looks to me like we have this plan put in place of let's put a pipeline up and get it to Canada and use it all up in 25 years, 30 years. We end up with a situation like we did with the oil business. We put these oil lines up. We hired all these folks. We brought them in. As soon as the oil line is done, we had a bunch of unemployed people. We didn't have long-term careers, long-term economy established. And I think we have an opportunity to break that syndrome. The other part of it is the price of natural gas goes up about 4% a year. I mean, with today's interest in banks, I mean, that's much better than money in the bank. You know, why are we worried about trying to get rid of it in 25 or 30 years? Why can't we use this long term to put an economic base in Alaska? And it lasts 100 years. So your children will have careers up here and not just going to work on a pipeline. And generally what happens, a bunch of people come up from the lower 48, work on the pipeline. We don't have an income tax, so we don't get much benefit from that. And they go back after the pipeline's done. The other problem, I think, with the pipeline is, even though I know it's a popular topic and I'm not trying to start political issues here, but is none of that pipe is made in the United States. It just increases our trade deficit to buy the pipe. And I really just don't think it optimizes the value of the resources. So what I'm suggesting is we have some distribution across Alaska now, but we set up more. We can drop the cost of gasoline, what we normally use, and diesel fuel by about half using natural gas, just like we're doing in Salt Lake City, the numbers you saw earlier. They can be used to run cars, boats, trucks. And also, one of the neat things about natural gas is it's incredibly inexpensive to turn it into hydrogen. Most of the natural gas is CH4, which is methane. And CH4, with not very much electrical power, you can turn into hydrogen. So we could end up with a long-term strategy where hydrogen is where we want to be in 25 or 30 years. And we'll go through the interim stage of natural gas to get there. My little slogan down here, Alaska gas for Alaskans first. I don't know why we want to try to get rid of it so quickly when we can use it strategically. As I mentioned earlier, if you have low-cost energy and you have water and you have labor, which we do, we can set up long-term employment opportunities. This company, Silicon, that I mentioned earlier, that was going to be donating the wind turbine, when I was sitting down with them, still drinking the ethanol, they asked me to look at where to put a production facility in the United States. And we started talking about the characteristics, what it had to be. And we had to have water. We had to have cheap electricity. Their product is fairly small and very high valued. You know, why doesn't Juneau work for a place like that? Look what happened in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is not close to anywhere either. But they set up a strategy saying that's what they were going to do, and they attracted Microsoft. They brought in this big corporation, very clean technology, and they had employment for their people. They had a nice environmental or economic growth in that country. I also mentioned here about remote villages. If I were looking at putting a facility like silicon production facility in Juneau, the deal that I would want to make if I was in charge of it, and I'm not, but if I was, would be let's have sub-assembly plants in places like Cake, Angoon, other places. So now if we get a little extra power in those locations, we can create a life there which is really economically sound, where people don't have to get subsidized, and we can create careers for them. Put a cabinet level energy czar in place, and I call it energy and water together, and I'll talk a little bit about why I say that in a minute. Utilize the wind and other alternative energy that we have all through Alaska strategically to attract companies and to lower our costs. The feed-in tariffs, the way that, they call them power purchase agreements, which is actually what I'm going to be putting together. What Ontario is doing and what Spain did to make their conversion is they would pay for solar energy 42 cents a kilowatt hour to put power into their power system. And so it was private investment actually doing it, but they would get paid for just only on performance. They didn't get paid if they didn't put the kilowatts in, they didn't get paid. But it was a very good way to make a conversion. When I was in San Diego, I've never understood this carbon credit program. And so I went to a 2-hour course simplifying the carbon credit program. It looked to me like it was pretty complex. When we have a government that's not able to figure out how to loan money for homes, I thought it was kind of ridiculous to get into a carbon credit program when really what we want to have is clean alternative energy and companies that don't fall in line with coming out with lower pollution standards. I looked at fines and just double them every year. You double them every year and that multiplies pretty quickly, and I'll guarantee you, having run billion-dollar companies before, people are going to get in line pretty quick. I think a plan could be put together in detail. In fact, I have a much more detailed plan than this, to cut our oil usage in all of Alaska by 80% in 10 years. And going back to the 25-year plan in order to look at hydrogen and where we're going to go after natural gas and those conversions are made in alternative energy conversions. In summary, create long-term jobs in Alaska by using energy resources strategically, capture more value of the Alaskan natural gas and use it for Alaskans. Today, you know, if the gas is selling for $2 in Canada, by the time you put all the distribution costs in it, we're only getting $1 for that gas. Let's get the $2 by using it here in Alaska. And we can improve the health of the people and the environment. And I'm going to talk more about that, some detail on that in a few minutes. Southeast Alaska. When I look here, and there's actually an article in the paper today about it, I don't think we have any choice but find a way to expand the grid across Southeast Alaska. I was with the chairman of BC Hydro a few weeks ago, and he and I were having some more ethanol. And they are buying power today. They can't supply enough power. They would love to buy it from us. And if we had excess power and we had a grid connected to British Columbia, they would do it. And there are a lot of opportunities also within the Southeast to connect the grid together. And a lot of the plans are in the paper today, so I won't spend too much time on that. Optimize the alternative energy development. We talked about different ways to do that. Tidal energy. Leverage excess power and water to attract clean industry. Don't look at just lowering energy costs. Let's look strategically at how we can access energy and create opportunities to bring more businesses in. Use alternative energy to heat buildings, downtown areas. Some of our municipal buildings down there are heated by oil today. You know, we have ground source heat pumps. We don't even have to dig holes. We have these mines. We could put those in the mines and actually create the energy to heat a lot of the downtown. And I really think Juneau could become an example of a modern green city, or model green city, and it should really showcase as a capital to bring in, attract tourism, and really put our name on the map. This is kind of where it gets interesting also. A national plan. Everybody's been talking about this, and every time you turn on the TV, you can't get away from this. I set up the objectives to eliminate the need for imported oil within 10 years. The magic behind the 10-year mark is statistically I'm going to be dead in 15 years, so I wanted to do it in my lifetime. Reduce greenhouse gases, put sufficient power in place to return manufacturing base back to the U.S. One of the things that seems to be missed when you read these articles is we've moved so much production out of the U.S. and we haven't had to upgrade the generating capacity in the lower 48 because these industries have left, even though our requirements for power are going up because of computers and other things. So we couldn't move all those companies that have left back into the U.S. right now. Couldn't do it because we couldn't supply the power for it. So I think that should be one of our national objectives. Put a cabinet level energy and water czar in place in the federal government and pay this person on performance. Here's the deal I would make with that guy. I would say we will pay you, you can't have any other job, but we'll pay you 1 cent for every barrel of foreign oil we don't have to import because we found a way to create clean alternative energy to take the place of that barrel of oil. 1 cent. Think about that. We have $700 billion. Well, I'm protected. We have $700 billion right now. That's about 70 billion barrels. 1 cent's $100 million. Now, maybe we don't want to go a cent. Maybe we want to go to 1/4 of a cent. But it's a lot of money. But lobbyists aren't going to influence him. He has an assignment to stop bringing in foreign oil and find a way to replace it. And he only gets paid in performance. He gets $1 a year, and that's it, plus performance bonus. I worked most of my career with European companies, and in those companies, we always put together 50-year plans. 50 years is a long way out, but when you're talking about a country like the United States, 50 years is certainly not unreasonable to start talking about energy plans and where we're going to be in 50 years. And it may take us 50 years if we want to become a hydrogen society unless we have some other way to do it. So I think a 50-year plan is pretty important also. This was the issue with water. I mean, we certainly have no shortage of water in Juneau, that's for sure, especially this summer. I started wearing out my raincoat coats. But when you look at alternative energy, a lot of them take a lot of water. Ethanol, you have a lot of rain required for your plants that you're using. Fuel cell cars, same issue. Plug-in hybrids, if you're using even hydro to create your electricity, you still need a lot of water. Even gasoline and nuclear, you've got to have cooling towers and those kind of things. So I think combining the energy czar with the water czar makes a lot of sense because in most areas of the United States, the two are pretty closely linked. The full life cycle cost of energy is something that also needs to be looked at pretty quickly. Today, we really don't pick up the entire cost. And what European Union has done is they put end-of-life vehicles, ELV, where they've actually put the onus back on the car manufacturer to recycle that car. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, today when that exhaust leaves your back of your car, or when it goes out at that stack, that coal-fired plant, where does it go? It goes in the atmosphere. It gets absorbed in the water. The pH in the water has gone up in the oceans have gone up about 0.5% over the last couple of decades, harming fish and crabs and other animals. A lot of folks talk about giving Exxon a windfall tax incentive. I really don't like that idea. I don't think it's necessary. But I do think they ought to have some kind of tax or some kind of reserve that they have to set up to pay to clean up the air and clean up the water and be responsible for the entire product line. Other things that are not included in the cost are environment, medical, defense costs. And calculations I did, and it took me a long time to figure it out. It looks like we spend about $300 billion a year defending the Middle East, primarily for our oil interests. So the plan would be, I'd be looking at using feed-in tariffs so I can get private industry to finance the program. Use alternative energy to substitute for natural gas and eventually coal in electrical power generation. I'll explain this more in a minute. Use coal to provide material for gasification and provide incentives to switch transportation to natural gas and then in the future to hydrogen. And here's how it works. Today, as I mentioned, most of our transportation is by gasoline, diesel, and that type of thing. So what we do is this is our electrical generation. We look at this 50%, which is coal, and we look at this 22%, which is done by natural gas today. And you can see the kilowatts and do the calculations over here. We take the coal and run it through gasification plants. We use the natural gas as it is to run primarily trucks would be the first priority, and then cars. And we backfill this with alternative energy. The cost for imported oil today, $700 billion. We've talked about that. The defense costs, I didn't put $300 billion in here. I cut it in half, saying defense never, nobody can ever, government never cuts anything for the full cost. So I broke it in half for them. Looked at environmental costs, and it costs right now in imported oil about $860 billion. Transition cost started out at 30 cents a kilowatt hour for a feed-in tariff. It goes down every year. Coal liquefaction plants, I did some calculation on that, $190 billion. It costs about $482 billion to make the transition. And here's how it breaks down. We have a temporary cost of electricity from the feed-in tariff of about $190 billion. We decrease our fuel costs by about $150 billion. So we're a little bit negative there. But we pick it up in decreasing our defense costs. Our deficit goes down by $700 billion. It's a huge amount. And where does that $700 billion go? It goes right back into the U.S. economy. It would be probably the biggest job creation program we've ever had in a country. We have no more dependence on foreign oil because of the fact our alternative energy fund changeover would eliminate about 60% of the greenhouse gases. Not one domestic coal or oil employee would lose their job because we're still using that product. And we'd be using the coal for syngas. We'd be using our domestic oil just as we're using it today. We have the technology to do it, and actually there'd be virtually no cost to the taxpayer to pull it off. It would just take the incentive of the government to want to do it. Sounds relatively simple. Who's going to be against this? Anybody who makes their business from war. General Dynamics, anybody who makes military weapons, because all of a sudden the Middle East is not going to be that important to us anymore. We may still do some humanitarian stuff over there, but that's up to somebody else. But we would not have to have a strategic interest in the oil anymore. And it would change a lot of the dynamics in the world, in my opinion. Quick look at the future. This is the air car. It uses compressed air. It's made in France. It's supposed to be in the market within 2 years. I have a friend that's actually driving one of these prototypes right now. It has a small little furnace in it, basically. It runs off of gasoline, and it heats air, just like the old steam engines that you see, the old trains. This heats the air, expands it, and you get 100 miles per gallon with it. Pretty good stuff. And I'm not going to talk much about electric cars because I don't think they've gotten to where they need to be. I think you need more than 30 or 60 miles from electric cars. But air cars, if you're getting 100 miles per gallon, that's pretty darn efficient. This is the Honda hydrogen car. Went down about 4 months ago to Los Angeles to meet the hydrogen cars that came across the United States. There were 11 of them. And the BMW is the only one that uses a standard compression type engine. The rest use all fuel cells. But the technology is there in the 65 stations in the United States today. If you have natural gas coming to a station, you can add a little equipment and actually end up with hydrogen. So it's very doable. A lot of infrastructure would need to be put in place. Some of the things MIT is looking at is getting rid of power systems altogether. And in many cases where you put photovoltaic or wind up here, and you'd have water down here, and you'd store the hydrogen, oxygen that you create from your photovoltaic during the day. And so you'd be able to run your home at night as well as during the day from your systems. And this is one of the things they claim they'll be ready to start marketing this kind of thing within 5 to 10 years. This is just a heat exchanger using ammonia. There are a couple places around here that are looking at using ammonia. Ammonia is a power carrier, very similar to hydrogen, pretty effective. This is pretty cool. This is a chip that's going to be made in Asia, and they put photocells in the masks, and it takes 5% of the power. I didn't word that right. You only eliminate 5% of the requirements for power on the ship by putting the photocells, but 5% of the kind of fuel these kind of ships burn is a lot of power. So it's a huge cost reduction for this company, at least they're claiming it. It'd be really interesting to see once they get it up and running. There are events that I believe there are 4 events that I would call events of mass destruction. And you never can enter a presentation on a positive note anymore in this day and age, but we will, trust me, we will. And global warming is actually number 2 on my list. It's not even number 1, but it's still darn important. And these are events, they're not like atomic bombs, they're things that we do on an everyday level, like global warming, heating our house, running our cars, those kind of things. And I think they'll lead to catastrophic results if we don't make a change. And I think we actually have the atmosphere in Washington today and other places around the world to make a change. Every time we choose to spend money on drilling a new well, as opposed to investing in alternative energy, into clean alternative energy, we're making a decision to harm our own health, that of future generations, and that of the environment. I was at a presentation here not terribly long ago last year where they identified and proved that the cruise ships, the pollution coming out of the cruise ships were actually damaging some of the forests. It doesn't take a lot to damage the environment in a fragile situation like we have here in Juneau. I almost didn't put this in, but I just couldn't help myself. And I tell you why I decided to put it in. When I was running the company in Mexico, I was running about the 20th largest company in Latin America. We put a healthcare program in place. Our number 1 cost in that healthcare program was respiratory problems with children. This was in Mexico City. Very polluted place. The number 1 cost we had in Sao Paulo, Brazil, was respiratory problems with children. I moved 3 families down to work for their father. The father could work for us in Mexico City. They were down there for a year and a half, and I had to move them all back because their children were having these problems. I think this is really serious where we're at today. The cost of it, and it's right in the paper, I think today's paper actually, there's 350,000 people died from pollution in China last year. There are about 500,000 around the world. We had about 10,000 in the United States. And this is a picture of Beijing when all the factories are operating. When you saw the Olympics, they stopped all the factories operating, but this is what it looks like. And I've spent a lot of time there, and believe me, it's not very pleasant to be there. You feel sick all the time you're there. We currently have the technology we need to eliminate the need for using this foreign oil, reducing greenhouse emissions, and we can do this very quickly. I mean, within a 10-year period, I really think that's doable. We just have to have the desire of the people to do it. I love cartoons, and I think this is a pretty typical cartoon. Kind of goes back to Prohibition. So with that, thank you very much for your